All right, man. Well, first tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Shane Brenner. I live in Salt Lake. I have a wife. I got 4 kids. I teach martial arts, teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Most of my life, I want to learn how to speak Spanish, and so I'm here talking about that today.
And you wrote a book, right?
I did. So the book that I wrote, it's called Breaking Fluent. Just came out about a week ago. It's a long process, but eventually, it's here.
Yeah, I read it. It's really good. Tell us a little bit about what does breaking fluent actually mean?
Yeah, so the way that I explain it kind of is that breaking fluent is when you achieve a certain level, a certain skill level in the language where you're no longer focused on the skills, but the experience the skills allow you to have. So basically, I want to think about it like this. Most people, the way that I can explain it is that when it comes to driving, right? Most people, when you first start to drive, you're like focused on like, okay, I gotta like back up, I gotta put in reverse, I gotta steer, and you're kind of like thinking about all these things. Okay, to press the brake. Once you get to the point where most people watching this video could drive a car, you're fluent in driving. So you're no longer focused on driving, the physical things you got to do, but just the experience of going different places. And same thing with languages. It's like once you get these certain skills, because right there's a stack of skills, pronunciation, grammar, list goes on and on. But once you just get those locked in, now you just experience the language.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Got to ask about the subtitle. You call it the never-ending journey of self-improvement, self-discovery, and self-inflicted grammar mistakes. That last part, self-inflicted grammar mistakes. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so probably grammar is like one of the biggest mountains to climb when it comes to languages. But the funny thing is, the more you concentrate on it, the less fluent you are. And so what I've come to understand or believe is that yes, we need grammar because obviously if you don't have grammar, it's hard to like speak with precision. But if you're so focused on grammar, the words are just like, dripping out of your mouth instead of flowing. Actually, grammar gets in the way. So, most important thing is actually just did you transmit a message and did they understand the message? If you did, then basically you're fluent, right? Because it's flowing out of me.
So, as far as the mission, you describe this as a mission in the book. Why would you say learning a language is more of a mission than simply a goal?
Yeah, so I mean, we have certain like goals in life. So, for instance, let's say my goal is to mow the yard. Okay, that's a pretty easy goal. You're gonna knock that out in whatever it is, 10, 20 minutes. My goal is to go to the gym and like get a good workout. My goal is to the list goes on and on of things we have that are goals in life, but certain goals like just require much more time, much more energy, and it feels more like a mission. So for instance, let's use another example. Let's say somebody was like trying to bench 400 pounds and you started off benching 130. Yeah, you could call it a goal, but it kind of feels like a mission, right? You cue the Rocky montage.
Would you describe it as an impossible mission?
No, it's not Mission Impossible, but this is that type of mission where it could feel that way. Because when you're going about it, right, it's like, you can communicate a few things. You're like, geez Louise, will I ever get to the point where I could actually fully just say what I want to say and communicate a message without like stumbling and mumbling?
Well, you did it, and you're just an everyday gym bro like me, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So if you can do it, anyone can do it,
pretty much,
right? Okay.
pretty much.
Let's talk about time and commitment. This is what holds a lot of people up. How much time and energy does it really take to break fluent, and where do people get that wrong?
Yeah, so I mean, it takes a lot. I mean, I'm not gonna. This is actually, if anything, this is like this is probably maybe not the best advertisement because most of the time you see a language course that says, "Hey, you're gonna learn this in 30 days. Watch this. Learn the thousand most." No, no, okay. It's not that those thousand most common words. It's not 30 days. It takes a lot of time, but think of it more like time and energy in the sense of like, how committed are you to this? Are you gonna spend like instead of watching your show in English, are you going to watch it in Spanish? Okay, like after a hard day's work, maybe you don't want to watch something in Spanish, but like that's actually what it takes. You're actually going to have to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy. And so how long? Honestly, everybody's brain's different. If you're watching this and you're probably 15 years old, or 18, it's probably going to take a lot less, than if you're 70 and never learned another language. But whatever the case, it's like that's why it's a mission. You commit to the mission, and however long it takes you, that's how long it takes.
On average, if someone was setting about to learn a new language and break fluent, what are you looking at as far as like daily minutes invested?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like realistically, like this is where it's really interesting. In most hobbies and pastimes, right? So once you think about this, like I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, if somebody said that, hey man, I'm going to do an hour to like and a half a day of Jiu-Jitsu. I'm going to come to class, I'm going to train an hour and a half, and I'm going to do this 7 days a week. You'd say, wow, okay, that's a super disciplined person. Like that person's like they're on their way. In languages, like an hour and a half is like almost like par for the course if you want to like achieve fluency in like any kind of like, not 20 years down the road. So if you want to achieve like fluency within a shorter period of time, again, everybody's timeline is going to be different. Probably an hour and a half is like minimum. That's the minimum effective dose. Realistically, like if you could spend, 2, 3, 4 hours, that'd be even better. The cool thing is though, it's like, you do things anyways in your life. You listen to the radio, you watch shows. You just have to do that in Spanish.
Sounds good. One thing that you refer to in your book is called the habit foundation. You say the habit foundation. What does that actually look like day to day?
Well, yeah, so the habit, I call it just the habit, and the habit is the foundation. So what I've noticed in martial arts, we have a term that we have like in wrestling and jiu-jitsu. It's just called mat time. And so this goes back to what I was saying previous point that like, hey, if you show me somebody that comes in, if I see a student that comes in like 5, 6, 7 days a week and spends an hour and a half training, that's a lot of mat time. They're locking in a lot of hours. So the habit of actually just showing up to the gym and training every day, that's the foundation that's actually going to get you to the point where you are good at jiu-jitsu, or in this case, you can speak a language. And so there is other factors than just mat time, because if all you do is the same thing, but it's not the right thing, like obviously you're only going to go so far, and I kind of document that, why the foundation of spending time with the language is the foundation. But again, like from there you have to iterate. So you have to iterate. But like that is the foundation. You have to spend time with the language.
Yeah, you're making it a habit as opposed to a chore or just something extra that you do every day.
Yeah.
You brush your teeth every night.
Pretty much.
It's automatic. It's a habit.
Yeah.
It's not something you think about.
Yeah.
All right, great. Words of the Four Wise Men. In your chapter, Words of the Four Wise Men, what did you learn about vocabulary, and why are words still so important?
Yes, I mean, I talked about this. I actually have a dearly departed buddy. His name was Mickey. This guy he was in his like 70s.
Like Mickey from Rocky?
Yeah, he was like my Mickey. Exactly. He was my Mickey, right? I call him Mr. Miyagi, but really in hindsight, I should have actually. Now you got me thinking about it. I should have called him Mickey, like he was my Mickey in Rocky. So it was a good point. So anyways, yeah, he was my Mr. Miyagi. He was my Mickey. But I asked him early in this journey, right? He was a polyglot. He actually was a genius as well. He was like certified actually through Mensa. Like I saw the card. He's like, check out my card. This dude is a legit genius. Great man. But I asked him, I was early, I'm trying to like figure this out. I'm like downloading apps and like, reading books and like the best way. And I was like, so, what's the secret, man? What do we got to do? And he just like, put it simply, he goes, words. He goes, you got to have the word for what you want to say. He's like, if you don't have the word, it's going to be hard to express what you want. So I was like, words, okay. I mean, it seems simple enough. Obviously, there is more to languages than just words, but really at its core, it's like you are expressing ideas via words. And so you have to accumulate a lot of words. Obviously, there's other people I mentioned within that. There's Steve Krashen, who has a theory about its comprehensible input. So basically, the way that he describes it is we learn a language through absorbing messages that we understand, and eventually we kind of just, slowly but surely get to the point where we change and we could actually speak the language. There's a little more to it than that, but that's like in a nutshell. But basically, you got to have words, man. All the stuff that you say in English, now you're going to have to say them in a different language. And if you don't have the word for that, it's going to be tough to really get some meaning across.
So knowing words means expanding your vocabulary. And that would That would mean memory exercises, proving your memory, because you forget things on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. It's just natural. So you talk about not forgetting your reps. What's the difference between knowing a word and actually being able to use it in conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's basically active and passive vocabulary. So like passive vocabulary, just think about this. Like think of how many words that like you see even like in your, in English where you're like, you kind of understand, you get a sense of, what it means, but like how many times do you actually use that when you're speaking, right? I think well, I know you're a reader just like me, so there's tons of words where you read and it's like we just take it for granted that we know what it means. But realistically, you don't use that in your day-to-day language, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with Spanish, so or any new language you learn. You're going to see a bunch of words, and pretty soon you kind of, okay, I got the gist. I kind of understand what these guys are saying, but actually using the words, that's a whole different story. So, yeah, basically it's getting to the point where you can retrieve the word when you need it. And that takes a certain amount of reps. I go through different ways, like different methods that I use to turn passive vocabulary into active vocabulary. That's really one of the biggest hurdles, because as big a fan as comprehensible input from the Words of the Wise Men chapter, it wasn't quite enough to get me to the point, as promised, right? They kind of promised, hey man, just absorb enough messages and you could speak it. I had to kind of do some other methods to get to the point where my passive vocabulary became active, and that's kind of documented in that chapter.
Okay, fair enough. So knowing the words, that's one of the challenges. Being able to hear someone speak those words, especially at a rapid pace. And you actually address this in your Train to Hear chapter, Tune to Speak, Train to Hear, Tune to Speak. What does it mean to train your ear and your voice like an instrument?
Yeah, so actually this one, along this journey, I ran into a lot of wise men. Actually, one of the wisest of them all, a guy named by the name of Dowson S. He has a YouTube channel it's called Mimic Method. Really, his take on language is like completely different than virtually every other person I've ever met. He had a musical background, so he actually teaches languages through sound. And fundamentally, the way he breaks it down, it's like, hey man, we're making sounds, and those sounds are going to your ear. You understand these sounds. We both speak English, so obviously these sounds are easily being transmitted to you. But if I was speaking some other language, different languages have different phonemes, they have different sounds, and so hey man, you might not understand this. And so basically in his course, which I took private lessons with him, I took his courses, he basically showed me how to essentially, it gets pretty nerdy here. We get to the point where we're you're slicing up little bits of sound and actually learning each phoneme for the language, learning where your tongue's at in your mouth, and basically we take it for granted that I'm making sounds that you understand, but realistically it's our tongue and our mouth and our throat's doing a lot of interesting things. And so in his courses, he teaches you exactly how to produce these sounds. And then when you learn how to start producing those, you actually can understand them better too. So
Okay, sounds good. And then, different regions, different areas of the world, you describe it as, this is just kind of an unrelated question, but I'm curious. Different parts of the world, you go to Mexico as opposed to Spain, as opposed to South America. They all speak Spanish, but they speak them in different cadences, different beats.
yeah.
So, you describing it as like listening to music.
Yeah.
I can see how that's relevant. Okay, Shane, so tell me about that breakthrough moment, the money shot. When did it finally click for you? When did you realize that you had actually broken Fluent?
Yeah, so it was actually funny enough. It was right before COVID. It was 2020. At this point, I want you to keep in mind I've been studying for years, and I had couple year streak of Duolingo. I used Anki apps to memorize words. I did all sorts of things. You name it, I did it. Now, fast forward years and years later, I just happened to stumble upon, I think I heard it through a podcast, this course, this platform called Baselang. And so Baselang, essentially, I joke around, it's kind of like the Uber of Spanish learning. So basically, if you want a car, right, obviously you just hit a button, somebody's at your front of your house. Baselang was the same thing. Basically, they had teachers you could speak with virtually 24/7 at the drop of a hat. So what happened was I I downloaded the platform, paid for it. I think at that point it's like 150. I think it's gone up a little bit since then. But again, this is like tutor lessons, like without limits. So I download the app, have the conversation, the initial like intro, and like I actually passed the grammar test like 100%. They were like, "Oh, you speak good Spanish." I'm like, but still, I'm having these conversations like, I could speak. At this point, I could speak Spanish. And again, some people might even thought I was fluent. I didn't consider myself fluent at this point. But what happened was, with limitless classes, like that first month, I literally was speaking like 2-3 hours a day. And so all the language that I had like downloaded into my brain for years and years, eventually, we're at the point where I'm having an hour-long conversation with, somebody from Venezuela, and we're talking about philosophy and politics, this and that. So realistically, like had I downloaded an app or started speaking more, could have happened sooner, but it was literally year. And I think this is like at this point, maybe 7 years into it. So think about this. I wanted to speak for many years, could have conversations, but
But about like very specific topics, like asking for directions,
yeah,
recommendations at a restaurant. But these are open-ended conversations where you're going from topic to topic to topic, no preparation, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, exactly. So, I mean, literally, it's when you're having an hour-long conversation with no English and it's we spanning different topics, at that point, I was like, all right, I've reached fluency. And really, I realized in this book that was just the beginning because, once you get to the point where you could have a fluent conversation and we could just kind of go back and forth, it's easier to learn from that point. It's almost like a snowball effect at that point. So, yeah, it took me many years, but realistically, again, shout out to Baselang. I downloaded that app, started speaking with people hours and hours, a day. Then, eventually activated all that passive vocabulary. I activated it.
When you're speaking to those people through the app, are they patient? Are they nice? Or are they trying to rush you? Are they, they're not making fun of you or anything like that?
No, no, no. In fact, actually, I kind of talked about that because in the chapter, which I call the long con, I joke around. I call this the short con and long con. You'll read the book. You'll see what I'm talking about. But I hired some other tutors. So basically, I did hire some other and that guy. He was a cool guy, right? Whatever. But we had about 10 classes, and the tail end of it, he it kind of seemed just more like a job for him. It wasn't like it was. So that was with a different company though. With Baselang, like. One thing I like about Baselang actually is the fact that it's like a new person. Like, I could just keep going to the same person if I vibe with that person. And so, no, I mean, everybody's super nice. I mean, this is their job, obviously, but and every person's different, right? We just vibe with different people. But that's the beauty of Baselang. You could actually, if you're cool with somebody, you kind of vibe with them, like reserve that person more or pick somebody else. But yeah, they were all cool, though. I mean, I didn't have any bad teachers.
Yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds fun. Question more for myself. If someone's been stuck at un poquito, that's one of the phrases you use in your book. You kind of know a little bit, but not a lot. You can kind of fake it until someone really presses you.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. I'm in the un poquito stage.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you would suggest that they change to break out of that stage and go to like an intermediate level?
Yeah. Something I actually introduced later in the in the book. Actually, it was a concept I kind of like intuitively knew the concept. I actually talked about it earlier chapters. So this chapter added on a lot later in the book, but I think it's like is the concept of language islands. And so language islands is like basically where you script out a bunch of things that you want to say, right? For instance, if we just start going about our day and you start thinking about things that you would want to say, so you're like. What time is it right now? Or simple example, like, okay, how would you say that? Like, oh, ¿qué hora es? Okay, oh, you look it up, ¿qué hora? Okay, I say, ¿qué hora es? It's like, so basically, as you go about your day, right, you sit there and start thinking about things that, ¿qué estoy haciendo ahora? It's like, what am I doing right now? It's like, and then you just look around, it's like, oh, I'm doing this. And so now as you start thinking about your day, you start looking around, don't just try and translate, look up how a native would say that, and then you go back to the earlier chapter on the reps, right? You can't forget your reps. You're going to drill those things. So if you get enough language islands built, like literally if you could say, let's say, just imagine you could say 100 things. If you had 100 phrases, not words, but phrases that you could say that are relevant to you in your life, right? You could talk about something with work or, ask for direction, whatever it is. But literally at 100 phrases just down pat, I think that could actually catapult you. So I think that if you want the quick shortcut, like get a bunch of language islands. Now the thing with language islands, they actually take a lot of energy because you're trying to memorize phrases. But if somebody had the energy, if you have the time and the energy and dedication, you could actually go from the point of just speaking a little bit, right, un poquito, to like a lot, right? You could actually get the point where you're like, fluent-ish. You could actually sound fluent. And again, I called that one chapter the short con. Now the short con, for those that read the book, I called it con because I think like when you con somebody, it's like a confidence man. When you have a short conversation with somebody, and if you had enough language islands, you could actually kind of con the person, like, right, the point where they think that you're fluent just because you said a few things like confidently enough. So the short answer is download a lot of language islands, and that actually could like into your memory and get the point where you could say them like fluently. And
I think, and we talked about this in previous conversations off camera, a great language island, a great demonstration of a language island are those viral YouTube videos where like a black dude will walk into a Chinese restaurant and speak perfect Mandarin. Now, do they understand Mandarin in its entirety? Probably not. But they know, they can anticipate every question around the topic of ordering food. Where are you from? How did you learn Chinese? Would you say that that's a language island?
100%. So shout out to Moses McCormick. So that's actually, he was an African American dude. Had tons of videos. That dude spoke like, he's a legend. Rest in peace. Actually, he passed away, unfortunately. But he was a huge inspiration for me. He didn't speak like, because he spoke some insane amount, like, I don't know what it was, like 50, 60. And he would speak obscure languages too, like, I don't know, like
Navajo or
yeah, he would speak all kinds of like weird languages, and he would just like see people, and he'd be like, "Oh, where are you from?" They'd be like, "I'm from like this like small region of Africa or whatever, this part of like wherever the Vietnam," and then he would actually be able to say that. And so I talk about this like it's very similar to sales, right? So anybody that's done a sales and actually got good at sales, in sales you actually say the same thing, you say the same script. And then people usually say, have the same objection, and then you say the same rebuttal. But the point being is that you've said that script and those rebuttals more than they've said those objections. And so it's the same thing. So in a sense, you almost could like read people's minds. Like when I say this, they're going to say this. And so when you download enough language islands, what happens is when you go to say something, like, let's say again, let's just use a very simple example. ¿Qué hora es? Like, it's like, perdón, señor, ¿qué hora es? It's like what time is it? So if you had that in your memory and you could say that fluently, what are they going to say? They're not going to say like my favorite color is it's red. That'd be ridiculous. Like why would they say that? They're probably going to say, yeah, it's like 7 o'clock, right? They're going to say the time. If you ask somebody, ¿Cómo te llamas? It's like, what's your name? They're not going to say what their favorite food is. Yeah, I want to eat some tacos. Like that doesn't make any sense. When you say something, they're going to say something related to what you just said. So when you have enough language islands, you're going to say something and they're going to respond accordingly. And this actually, in a sense, you could actually direct the conversation. Now, language islands only get you so far. So this is where I think marrying both language islands with comprehensible input get you to the point where you could say things, but you still have to understand when those people speak back. And this is where comprehensible input get you to the point where you understand. So yeah, it's funny because there is a famous quote by Nelson Mandela. Speak to a man in your language and you speak to his mind. Speak to a man in his language, you speak to his heart. And you see that in those videos. When you if you get like a Jap, like just the other day I was like some lady, she was Japanese, konnichiwa. If you just say that, it's like just them hearing their mother tongue, like it's like, they're like, oh yeah, it's like konnichiwa. It's like just saying that, it's like a phrase can actually like warm somebody up. So it's like when I saw him and like in those videos doing that, I was like, I want that power. And so that's why actually, again, I just became a language nerd, not just Spanish, but I started like, what else can I learn how to say?
And even if your pronunciation isn't like spot on, the fact that you're trying, I think goes a long ways. It's like when you see someone at the gym who's just starting out, they may not be in the best of shape, but you respect the fact that they're there and they're doing it. 100%. You can't begrudge that. Just like if someone's attempting to learn your language and putting in an honest effort, you can't begrudge that either. All right, man. Anything else that you wanted to add about your book? Where can it be found?
Yeah, check it out on Amazon. I have, digital right now. The Kindle version's on sale for 99 cents. So pick it up. Yeah, I'd love to hear your reviews, comments. Have paper book, hardback copies on there too. As far as, yeah, like again, just I guess what you would get out of the book. It just documents my journey. I joke around. I don't know if it's the best language book, but it's one of the easiest, funniest reads that you'll pick up. And really, instead of like downloading a bunch of courses and trying to figure out a bunch of stuff, I kind of did that work for you. It took me years and years. So when you read it, I'll kind of give you like lay the land of like, hey, this could be a better approach than just doing some of the more common stuff you hear. So I'm just hoping that like people that get this get a good fun read and actually motivates them to reach their mission of breaking fluent as well. So
Yeah, it's a great book. I enjoyed it. It was really fast. It's a quick read, but you kind of like roadmap everything for someone who's interested in learning a new language and kind of go over like, the trial and error you experienced. We're just dumb jocks, and it's very relatable to like the everyday person who has even a passing interest in learning a new language. Well, I appreciate you coming in and chatting with us. And keep an eye out for the book by Shane Brenner, Breaking Fluent. We're going to post some links on the video below. And we'll probably be back with another follow-up interview later on.
all right, thanks for having
All
me.
right. Yeah, we'll see ya.
See you, man.